In this short video, I'm going to take you through the steps of logging into the Sage Math Cloud, creating a project, creating a file inside that project, and using that file to do some basic math stuff. In particular, solving equations, plotting functions, defining variables, and just in general, working with simple algebra concepts. So the first thing you have to do when you go to cloud.sagemath.com is you have to create an account. If you already have an account, you can just log in up here, but you can connect to an account through Facebook or GitHub or Google Plus or Twitter, or you can just create your own account based on an email address. Once you create your account, you have to let me know which name or which email address you used to create your account so I can add you to the course site. But for now, we have an account already. I have an account, so I'm going to log in. And when you log in, generally speaking, you end up at your project page, which looks something like this. I have a lot of projects already going, but you're not going to have any projects the first time you log in. So the first thing to do is to create a new project. A project is essentially a computer, something that you can work on remotely and that will do math for you. So I'm going to create a new project. You can call it whatever you want, and you can change these names pretty easily. So we're going to call this one First Project. You can give it a description if you want, but I'm not going to bother. And you create the project. Once you create it, it's going to show up in your list of projects. To enter the project, you just click on it, and it'll open you up to an empty page once it starts. The empty page doesn't really have anything on it, except for an ability to create some new files. So we'll click on this to create a new file. And you have the ability to create a lot of different types of files. The main types are going to be Sage Math worksheets, which is what we're actually going to do. But you can also create a text document using LaTeX. You can create a Python notebook using Jupyter. You have terminals, task lists, and if you look under this file folder here, you actually have all sorts of different projects or different types of languages that the computer will recognize. For us, we're going to be doing math, and so we're going to use the Sage Math worksheet here. So we'll call this first file, and click this button, and it'll create our worksheet and open it up. This can sometimes take a little bit of time. It is a cloud-based server, and so depending on your connection speed, you do have to be connected to the internet, and depending on the speed, this could take a little bit of time. But once it's finished loading, we can use this to do all sorts of fun math. We're going to start with algebra, but eventually throughout the course, we're going to move into some calculus concepts. Okay, so now our file's done loading, and what we want to do is do some basic arithmetic and see how that works in Sage. So let's say I want to do 4 plus 2.5. I can just enter in 4 plus 2.5, and the computer will be able to compute this for me. In order to get it to run this particular line, I can either click on the green run button here, or I can hit Shift and Enter. And when I do that, the result pops up, and in this case, it's what you expect to be 6.5. We can do another arithmetic operation, something like 2 to the 5th, and the answer pops up fairly quickly. As I said, this is a cloud server, so if your connection speed is fairly slow, this might take a little bit of time for it to work. But it will work in the background, and it will work eventually as long as you're connected. And it does automatically save throughout what you're doing, so if you do lose a connection, it will be accessible after you get your connection back. The reason we have to hit Shift Enter is because you can tell Sage to do multiple things at the same time. So if I want to do 3 raised to the 4th power, if I hit Enter, I just move on to the next line. So maybe I also wanted to do 5 minus 1. If I hit Shift Enter now, it'll execute both of these and give me both results. And this is a way of doing more complex things and telling Sage in order to work with them. The first algebra type thing I want to do is I want to solve an equation. So maybe I want to solve the equation 4x squared plus 2x is equal to 5. The equation I'm going to work with, I can write in here a few different ways, but I'm going to do it as a single line. I want to solve the equation, so I'll put inside parentheses my equation. 4x squared plus 2x is equal to 5. And just to be specific, I want to solve it for x. This is not going to work, and I'll show you why in a second. I'll hit Shift and Enter, and I end up with an error. And what the error is telling me is that it doesn't understand what 4x means. Because this is a computer system, it doesn't understand that putting two things next to each other means we want to multiply them. So we have to be explicit, and we always have to tell the computer, I want this to be multiplied. 4 times x squared. This is the same thing here. I want it to be 2 times x. We use the asterisk to tell us that. So I'm going to do this again, and it's not going to work again because it doesn't understand a single equal sign. We use equals in two different ways. We use them for definition, if we want to say x is equal to 6, or we use them as a part of an equation. In order to tell the computer the difference, when we're using it in terms of an equation, we use a double equal sign. So two things we need to do here. We need multiplication every time there's a multiply, and we need double equals to tell that this is the equation we're working with. Once I do this though, it'll work, and it'll tell me my answers. My x value is negative a quarter times the square root of 21 minus a quarter, and a quarter times the square root of 21 minus a quarter. So my two values of x that'll solve this particular equation. The next thing I want to be able to do is define a function. And we define functions the same way we define functions in real life. This will be a single equal sign because we're making a definition. So if I want to call f of x 4x squared plus 2x, then hitting shift and enter does nothing. All I'm doing is I'm telling the computer that this is what I want to call f. But now I can evaluate f at different points. F of 4, as an example, is 72. F of x minus 1, if I want to compose these two functions together, I can. And it'll show me what the composition looks like. If I want to plot the function, I can use the keyword plot, and I'll plot f of x, and it'll show me what the function looks like. It's a parabola, as you might expect, because it's a quadratic. And this is what the parabola looks like. I can get a little more control over my plot, and I'll just edit this one here by putting in some values for x. Maybe I want only the values between 0 and 5. So I plot f of x, that's the function I'm plotting, with the variable of x, where x ranges between 0 and 5. And this is what that looks like. Before I stop, I want to show you about defining variables. If you have an equation that has multiple variables, say you want to solve 4 times x cubed minus 3 divided by y is equal to 5, and you want to solve this for y, this is not going to work because the computer doesn't know what y is. X is loaded into the Sage Math Cloud as a predefined variable. But in order to work with other variables, we need to tell the cloud, or we need to tell Sage what those variables are. So before I enter solve in here, I need to tell Sage that y is a variable I'm working with. And I do that using this. I'm going to set y as a variable. We use the keyword var, or var, to indicate variables. And this is a variable that takes on the form of y. So once I set y to be a variable here, there are other ways to do this as well, and I'll show you those later. But if we use y as a variable, then this will allow me to solve this equation for y. And when I do that, I'll get y in terms of x, which is good because a lot of times that is what I want to do. Okay, this has been a very brief overview of the Sage Math Cloud. If you have any questions, feel free to comment or send me an email or ask me in person. And hopefully through the rest of the semester, you'll be able to see why these types of systems are very useful for understanding and exploring calculus.